when my dad was 8. Wives,
I don't think.
dispersed to different parts of Nigeria. My dad went down to the south near Lagos, where my grandmother brought him. And at the time, they were Christian missionaries. And not only were they teaching the Bible, but they were also teaching math, science, literature, all Western topics that we learned in school. And my dad was brilliant. He actually had memorized the Quran by the time he was like 6 years old, 6 or 7 years old. So when the missionaries came along, he was able to he memorized the Bible quick. Like he was able to memorize mathematical equations, and the missionaries were like, man, you're a savant. So they ended up playing a role in him. By the time he got done with high school, they played a role in him getting a full ride academic scholarship to London, and he ended up studying architecture, engineer, full ride scholarship. Got his bachelor's and master's in both architecture and engineering, and then he started accumulating his wealth and starting his businesses in the West, in the UK, and in the U.S. As a matter of fact, he was the first black man on the board of the World Trade Center in New York City.
Whoa.
He was one of the first black men on the British Financial Planning Council in Great Britain. And he just had all of these relationships, all of these connections, and he was just super successful because of his brilliance.
Yeah.
Fast forward to the 70s.
So hold on, a quick question for you. So you said your dad's family dispersed because there was, you said how many wives?
There were like 8, 9 wives.
8, 9 wives. Now, did you guys ever reconnect with any of the other family? Your brother ever connect with some of his other, I guess, half brothers, half sisters, anything like that?
My dad, well, I can't really. I'm so far removed from that because I mean we're talking like.
Have you considered going solar in Texas but afraid of the huge price tag attached? Most people don't know this, but almost 100% of homeowners make the switch for $0 down.
40s, 50s, 60s, you know what I mean? And so I can't really, and I was so small, I don't know, we'll get to it later, but I was so small that when my dad died and we came to the States that I never really connected with the other family members.
Got it.
For the most part.
So you didn't grow up seeing your grandfather's multiple wives or having any exposure to that.
No.
But it was
If you can't hear me what I'm saying, hey, this is not easy.
100%. 100% common. I mean, going back to biblical time, David had all it that motivated wise and all that.
It's a trip because it's interesting that there's a resurgence of this sort of polyamory, polygamy narrative now. And so I'm always curious of people that were closer to it, how do they view it as kind of being semi-connected to it? Clearly, again, you weren't super connected to it, but I'm always curious about folks who grew up in it and what do they think about it.
Yeah, I was too far removed from it because my grandfather had died like years earlier and decades earlier, and my dad didn't expose me to it. As a matter of fact, my dad had become more westernized, I would say, when he came, went to college in the West and got his education and started his businesses. So I think that was kind of worked out of him.
Gotcha.
By the time he came back to Nigeria. So in the 70s, he actually went back to Nigeria because he wanted to take all of his wealth and everything he learned to create like a Nigerian Wall Street or like a World Trade Center in Nigeria.
Wow.
Because Nigeria is very rich in resources, cocoa, oil, natural gas, gold, minerals. Even now, China is going to Nigeria and other parts of Africa and signing these deals to buy this land so they can mine for the resources, right?
Do you feel like that's kind of colonization all over again?
Somewhat.
I mean, it sounds super sus, man, where they're giving out these loans, but they can control the roads, and they're building this big system across it. It sounds super sus, man.
They're trying to build, from what I can't remember the exact name, but they're essentially trying to build a trail, like an invisible, this might sound stupid, but somewhat of an invisible trail or path from not just from Africa, but from other parts of Europe that's going to center into the heart of China so that, they could essentially control a lot of the resources. And they're playing on the corruption in a lot of these African countries, Nigeria being a very corrupt nation, because they're finding these politicians or governors and they're like, oh, I'll give you $50 million for this, be able to access this, when in reality that that mine or that oil reserve is worth 100 billion. You know what I mean? I just don't out a random number.
Sure.
And a politician's like, yeah, I'll take the 50 million. Wow. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of that going on as well. And, you know, because of all of the resources in Nigeria, that's why my dad wanted to create this Wall Street, this World Trade Center, so that Nigeria can be more organized from a business standpoint and can be respected, because if those resources were handled properly, there's no reason why Nigeria could be like America or Saudi Arabia, which is a very rich country because of their oil and resources.
Do you think the lack of it, quote unquote, being handled properly is because of imperialism, colonialism?
No, I mean, I personally, my opinion, no. Okay. I think that it has to do with an inherent corruption that's been a part of the nation for decades. You know, because colonialism in Africa went away. How long ago? I don't quote me on the number, but decades
hundreds
ago.
of years ago. In some parts. Yeah.
And so now you have people for the last 20, 30 years. Even we'll get to what happened to my dad, who have been, you know, politicians who have been stealing money and stealing resources. Can't blame that on colonialism.
Sure.
Can't blame a governor. As a matter of fact, here in the U.S. in the inner city, you know, I know speaking for myself, when people try to rise up through the ranks, right? What do they look to? Let me play basketball, let me rap, let me hustle, because that's how I could rise up. In Nigeria, the kids are taught from a very young age going to politics. Going to become a governor, become a mayor, become a senator, going to politics, because that's your way of becoming a multimillionaire or billionaire. It's so systemic, and it's wide press and known. There's a saying in Nigeria, every day is for the thief. That's like a well-known saying. There's a bunch of other sayings like, if you fight corruption, it'll fight you back. All of these sayings come out of Nigeria because it's very prevalent and widespread. So in my opinion, that can't be blamed on colonialism that happened decades ago. You know what I mean? Like, we have to, as people, we have to take responsibility for our actions. Whether it was 10 years ago, whether it was, you know, a person 10 years ago or a person 5 years ago or a person today, we all have to take responsibility for our actions and say, it's not this person's fault or, colonialism's fault. It's my fault. I'm the one that's stealing the money from my own people. You know what I'm saying? And so that's my 2 cents on that. But
that's good.
But yeah, my dad went back and he started this, and he bought a massive plot of land in Lagos area called Marico. He spent 7 or 8 million pounds on it at the time. And this is in the 70s, and a military coup happened shortly after. And so that land was taken from him. And you know,
they just took it from him.
Just took it.
So he buys. So your dad is a savant. He's brilliant. He's a Christian at this point.
Yeah. He took on the name. He took on the name John as a way to pay homage to the missionary. So yeah.
Got you.
I want to say he's like a born again Christian, but he had like the Christian attributes, if that makes sense, you know, entitled, just like America. A lot of Americans
influenced probably by a Christian worldview from the missionaries that helped, you know.